Dr. Sarath, thank you for doing this. Now, of course, you are Dr. Sarath Davala, an Indian sociologist talking to us all the way from Hyderabad in India. You will be in Malaysia soon to attend a conference to promote basic income in Malaysia. And of course, I want to introduce you as the president of the Basic Income Earth Network. And you've also co-authored a book called Basic Income, a Transformative Policy for India. Now, I'm going to pass it over to you, and let me introduce yourself and why it is that you do the work that you do.
Sushwan, thank you so much for having me on this show, and it's really wonderful to see you. I'm Sarath Davala. I'm a sociologist based in India, and before I became an advocate of basic income, I was working for a women's trade union, and I was teaching in a business school. I was an associate professor there. Then I worked for a women's trade union. Then they wanted to experiment that how would it be if we can give an unconditional cash transfer to people, because much of the time the union organizers are spending their time accessing the existing benefits because the delivery of the welfare schemes is very, very poor. So that was the impulse the union had to experiment. So that's how I got into being a scientist myself. I got into leading a pilot project in India way back in 2010 to 13. Professor Guy Standing was also our advisor there. So that's how I got into. I was very skeptical when I heard about basic income, because that was not the welfare grammar, right? You always want to give money to those who are in need and you identify in a very scientific way, and then you target, and then you hit the target, right? That's how all our poverty discourse has been. But then this idea comes and disrupts the way we think about poverty, right? And the means and the methods we use to alleviate poverty. So I was skeptical because I thought if you give unconditionally, will people be responsible about how they spend the resources that we are providing? But then being an anthropologist myself, I think when I experienced in the villages what actually this unconditional money did to people, their lives, at the individual level, at the household level, and also at the community level, I saw completely a new world altogether. Oh my God, why didn't we think of this before? You see, it has a multiplier effect. Eventually, we will talk more about that. It somehow has a multiplier effect both at the individual level, household level, and the community level. So that's how I got into the network called Basic Income Earth Network, which works in so many countries in the world. And then, well, the rest is history. And today I am the chair, and I will be the chair for another 2 months.
Under your interpretation of basic income, there are 5 characteristics. I think chief among which, I'll let you talk about all 5, but I think chief among which is the universality of the distribution, which is the same. Both rich and poor get the money, but there's 4 other characteristics as well. What are those 4 characteristics?
Yeah, it's actually the whole basic income way of looking at society is a little different. You see, it is seen as something, a foundation of a society. It's a new way of organizing our society, a social arrangement. It provides you a certain foundation on which you stand and then conduct your life, right? So the first is universality, as you rightly pointed out. The second is that it is individual. It is given to the individual, not to the household. The third is it is given periodically and not a one time or twice a year grant. For example, I think there are many programs that governments have where you say that, okay, we'll give you a subsidy, we will give you a grant twice a year. Or for example, in India, we have the housing scheme where you're given a small amount of money, you have to show that you have built this much, and then you get the second installment. That kind of a conditionality is there. So it is given to individuals, it is periodic, every month usually, and it is cash only. It is not vouchers, it is not any kind of smart card or any kind of programmable money or the digital currency that these days many governments are talking about. This is the third one. And the fourth one is that it is completely unconditional. There are no conditions that you have to meet, you have to satisfy to become qualified for this program, and there are no conditions that you have to fulfill in order to continue this. You are born into this. When you are born, you get it. When you die, you stop getting it. As simple as that. I mean, I can go into the logic why it is so, but you said universality. plus these four together, that is what is the definition of basic income. Because these days you have many journalists or countries and parties are trying to say we are what basic income, but then they are giving their own definitions. But this is our non-negotiable definition at the moment.
It sounds so good that it almost cannot be true. Even from the fiscal perspective, Doc, I think there are so many ways to pay for this, and it's not even a financial problem. It sounds to me like it's a social problem, and it seems to me that nowhere in the world has there been a true application of universal basic income. Right? Even though it makes so much sense, so politically expedient to do it. I think the closest could be the Alaska Permanent Fund, but even in America, I think Jerry Young tried to introduce this some years ago, but to no avail. Why do you think there's been no universal application?
Well, I think there are many pieces to what you have asked. Let me take the first, the incredibility or the disruptive nature, in the sense that why it is so difficult to believe that this is possible. Now, take for example, there is a basic income, there is that ethos in a particular, for example, an institution like family. The moment you are born into a family, you are entitled to care, right? You are entitled to certain resources. You are entitled to be looked after. In fact, I think it's also legal. You can also go to court and say that my parents are not looking after me, right? And that is acceptable to all of us. And if some parents are not looking after their children, we can actually admonish them and say that, why are you not looking after your child? It is part of our ethos, it is part of our culture globally, right? But the same logic, when you bring it to the public square, you say, no, you have to be very careful. You have to think whether we have that money or not. You have to see whether we can afford it. No, it's a bad idea. And all. You see, so many, because I believe, and all of us believe, that the role of the state is to care for its citizens, number one. Number two, state is not the owner of the natural resources. It's not the owner of the land. It is people who are the owners of the land. State is only a custodian. So when you are being looked after by a guardian, you have a right to ask the guardian that, how are you spending my money? How prudent are you? How sustainable is your way of spending? I have a right to ask. Similarly, we have a court case in India where you say that this is exactly what it said, that the government is only a custodian. And if the custodian is not doing his job. So let's come back to this universal thing. Why it should be given to everybody? Because it is not to alleviate poverty. The idea of basic income is not to alleviate poverty. The idea of basic income is, poverty will be reduced, definitely, there's no doubt about it. But the idea is that you have to have a society where everybody feels secure. And then you have the psychological dividends of being secure. I think the job of every parent is to ensure that the child is not insecure, right? Similarly, the job of the state ought to be, to make people secure. And income security in a cash economy is extremely important, right? Now, coming to where is it applicable anywhere? I think there are many small experiments going on all over the world, right? Now, for example, the point you raised about Alaska. In Alaska, the head of the state at one point of time realized that we have the oil, and this oil belongs to people, and every citizen of this state should get a piece of that oil proceeds, right? Similarly, you have a sovereign wealth fund in Norway. It actually belongs to people, right? It's also coming from that kind of a natural resource. You take Marica in Brazil, they also have oil, and that oil money is kind of given to people as a kind of through a smart card. Now, this is the ethos, and you have very large programs like Bolsa Familia in Brazil or Prospero, which has got diluted. There are many places that is already happening. Now, really, in India, I could say less than 10 years, 7-8 years, the political parties and the governments have begun to see the value of giving unconditionally. In 2017, one particular state, my state where I live, has announced a program for 6 million farmers. 6 million farmers. Every farmer, the one who owns half an acre to one who owns 100 acres, every farmer gets twice a year an unconditional support, you can say support, per acre, unconditionally. Everybody gets it. There's absolutely no targeting, no conditions whatsoever. Even if you're not cultivating, doesn't matter. So now, in the last 5 years, you see that is being applied to women. Many states, many political parties are now promoting the idea that all women between 18 and 60 should get a basic income, X amount of money every single month without any conditions on them, right? Now, you can see that lately there is a purchase, there is an acceptance of the idea that it should be unconditional. First of all, you save a lot of administrative resources and money because if you want to target, you have to have inspectors to ensure that people are not misusing it. So all those things cost a lot of money for the state. So they're saying that let's do away with all that and just give money to these people as an entitlement for their survival and existence and whatever. Now I see progressively more and more political parties are coming towards that idea of giving unconditionally, that also cash, probably because there is a widespread income insecurity in the world. Today, more and more, talk about Malaysia, talk about India, talk about Bangladesh, talk about even, for example, in Europe also, that the precarity has increased because life has become much income precarity. Life has become so much more precarious because you no longer have the jobs that they used to have in the past, right? You get a job and you live in that job till you retire and you get a pension. You go to a village and then have a small farm and grow potatoes and spend the rest of your life. That kind of a golden era is no longer there. Today we live in a gig economy progressively. I think that is what we have to grapple with now. And I see many political parties, governments are grappling with.
My issue is, why is it not applied universally? Why is it not a nationwide effort? Does it remain experimental? If it makes so much sense and it's politically feasible and it's financially feasible, in the most part, why is it not universally applied?
I think it is not about the fiscal question. It is not about the fiscal feasibility, as you rightly pointed out. It is more about our mindset. I think the mindset of scarcity is what all of us feel. That is number one. Number two is, I think, obviously people don't see, I think, the sense in giving somebody who is rich, right? And also, when you give to the poor, you want to really target and inspect and ensure. This is also kind of an inter-class prejudice, You always think, the middle class always thinks that the poor are irresponsible unless they are controlled. It's like parents thinking of the adolescents. You think adolescents are not as responsible as you are, right? So the rich think, or the middle class thinks that the poor are. So this is about the attitude. So unless you control them, regulate them, they will not be responsible with the free money. So the whole notion of free money is a very recent origin. If you look at it historically, when you give something without work, you call that free money. In India, we have new terminology called freebies. They call it freebies. Now, the whole point is that when you talk about freebies, you're actually raising this industrial ethic that only when you work, you deserve a wage. Otherwise, you don't deserve a wage. But in our own smaller communities, we don't believe in that. I didn't work when I had to get my father pay for my university degree, right? And I was studying till I was 30. Unfortunately for him, because I had to go to many places and study. All that I took it for granted that he's going to pay for it. But then we don't use the same logic, and when it comes to the public life, which is a point I've been making, we should make it universal. Increasingly, we will realize the importance of that because it's a one way of looking at life. Like it's like a voting right. Once you're 18, everybody gets a voting right. I mean, that is also later development. There was a time in the past that only graduates would get to vote. Or, see, the adult franchise came much later when you realize that everybody has a mind, everybody can think, and people should vote. You see, adult franchise was not a common thing because people thought that only men can think. Women are these emotional creatures who are good enough only for caring at home, okay? Cooking, doing the vessels, looking after children and the old people. Whereas men are the ones who know the public life and who can decide the right person who can rule us. So public life belongs to men, private life. Today we don't believe that completely at all. So public life, beyond public, Sunita Williams went to the International Space Station and stayed there for a year and came back. So I'm just pointing to the fact that it is the way we think that without wage, there can't be money. You see?
So you're a student of people. I mean, that's what sociology is, right? I know in Malaysia where we have a lot of social assistance, right? And it has promoted a culture of, in some parts of society, sloth, a culture of entitlement, a culture of not wanting to work or not needing to work as hard because the state takes care of them, or the mentality is have as many children as we want because the government will take care of us. What do you mean? What do you make of that from a social perspective? Do you think sloth will be encouraged if you give them free money?
Every single pilot study we have done across the world, starting from India to Europe to United States to Latin America to Africa, you name it, I think not one study has proven that people become lazy. In fact, when people are income secure, they work more because they want to better their lives. I think none of these studies have proven that this is the case. In fact, in all the studies that I've been involved, at least I have led two important pilot studies in India. I have seen that multiplier effect that I've been talking about. It doesn't make people lazy at all. The number of children is a kind of a cultural thing. You ask people in Japan or in Norway, they don't even want to get married, right? They forget about children, you see. Having number of children is a kind of a cultural ethos, or it's a religious belief, or it is something that comes from a different kind of an impulse, rather than the economic feasibility. If that is the logic, that if you're economically secure, then you will produce more children, then I think rich people should be having largest number of children. So that logic actually doesn't work. And the fact that I think this is the usual criticism that comes, the pushback that comes for the universal basic income is that either people will drink it away, which is what the interclass prejudice that I've been talking about, that they will drink it away, but I will not drink it away. If I drink, I'm very responsible, I drink, but they will not be able to drink responsibly, is the notion that the two classes think of each other, right? I don't have to apologize if I go a bottle of wine in the shop. I don't have to apologize to anybody. But the poor man, if he goes and buys a bottle of liquor, he has to be defensive and he has to apologize. I think these are all basically it's a questions of our attitudes toward that. And I think those are like, what should I say? Those are, I mean, the worst word I can use is like they're rumors. They are not based on any scientific data. I think if you see study after study, you don't see that happening at all.
Why do you think Jerry Yang failed to implement universal basic income in the US 8 years ago?
I mean, he brought the idea and he really popularized the idea, and he even called it freedom dividend. If your nation is free, you should also be, every individual should be free of that insecurity. You should also be because we say if there is an unconditional basic income, you actually begin to experience the real freedom, not the freedom that we experience now. People require time to actually digest this idea. Even when we go to the villages and say that we are going to start a program where we will give you unconditional income. In fact, some of our organizers were actually, police were summoned and they were arrested actually, saying that these are the people who are going to do a fraud upon us. You know, they're saying that they'll give money free for 18 months and then they will ask nothing from us, which means that there is a kind of some fake thing happening. People find it, because in this world you don't get anything for free except from your dad and mom maybe. But so it takes time for people to accept. When this idea was floated in 2014, 2019, by one of the major political parties in India, which is the Congress, they didn't have enough time to convince people. People thought that this is all unnecessary, irresponsible promise made by the party. You see, nobody voted for them. But then cut to 5 years later, in the smaller states, in some of the states, they actually voted for that party based on this promise to be given to women and farmers, right? Which are the bulk of the population, actually. So, so coming back to your question, why did Yang actually started this whole thing, even though the basic income discussions were there in academic circles in the United States. But today you have mayors for guaranteed income. I think it's a very large network in the US now. There are hundreds of pilots happening in many states, state after state, state after state. In one of the states recently, I think they also proposed a bill through referendum, which they did not succeed. The idea was that to increase the corporate tax, they had a minimum of 1%, to increase it to 3%. Okay, so that this money, entire money, can be given to the entire population of that. That was the proposal. But towards the end, I think they came till the last bit, and then towards the end, they have not succeeded in the United States. So there is a lot of advocacy happening in the United States about basic income. But now Trump's regime, it's again disruptive of many processes that have been going on. We don't know. Every day is uncertain now. I don't know how long. What is going to happen? And even Malaysia must be affected by the tariffs. So that's how even the guaranteed income movement also affected by Chuang, I think some of these ideas take a while before they can get embedded in the minds of people because they find it, why is this? This is a kind of irresponsible proposal. We can't afford it. As it is, we can't afford many things. We are in deficit. How can we bring more money? Is a kind of a logic.
Well, I mean, I know that you're doing a lot of work in Malaysia and you're collaborating with Dr. Geoffrey Williams on this issue of basic income in Malaysia. I mean, from a financial perspective, we spend a lot of money on subsidies, and a lot of that, if when they're dismantled, can be put towards basically free money for everybody in Malaysia, right? What does your work in Malaysia tell you about its possible application in this country?
There are two, three important facts. One is, I think, the precaritization is growing even in Malaysia, in the sense that more and more short-term contracts are the rule of the day rather than stable jobs for a long period of time. I think there is also a problem in Malaysia about getting the exact data on what is the extent of this precaritization? What is the extent of this informal sector? I think the current business models across the globe are only going to move in the direction of precaritization rather than going back to providing permanent jobs to people in factories or in organizations, in offices. You can see in offices, even in the IT sector, you have a situation where you have short-term contracts rather than a permanent job. Maybe only the government sector possibly will have a core of people who have a permanent job. Even in the government sector, you will have an outer layer of jobs which are like very precarious. They are there today, they are not there tomorrow. You can hire a computer operator for like 6 months and say, after that, we don't know. We don't have a project now. When there's a project, we'll call you back. As a result, I think, but then we don't have exact data on this. I think even in some research institutions in Malaysia are also pointing to this fact. In fact, I can show you documents which are pointing to the fact that it's so difficult to get that data. But then my hunch is that the precaritization is a norm. The gig economy is a norm for many, many more years to come. And we can't go back to that golden era of permanent jobs, right?
Of course.
That is number one. Number two is the amount of money that is being spent by the Malaysian government today. I think we have to take stock of the delivery track record. How efficient is the delivery? Is it really, are there any slips in it? Are there situations where the money is not being delivered efficiently? I think this is something we need to really examine. This is going back to the analogy of people are the owners and the government is only a guardian or a kind of a custodian. So we have to interrogate the existing ways of spending, which is based on old kind of thinking, not taking into account. So this is the kind of 20th century kind of thinking cannot resolve the 21st kind of century kind of problems that we are facing that are emerging now. And further, it may escalate now. So the second thing is about interrogating the existing way of thinking and also spending our welfare money. And is giving subsidies, is it that the best way to support? Or is there any other way of supporting? So I would actually urge, I mean, this is the kind of work we will continue to do in Malaysia and also Indonesia. We are doing both in India also, is to say that the efficacy of our spending, can we actually think from that direction and make it more efficient? Are there efficient ways of dealing with the emerging situation rather than imagining the problem? We are imagining the problem, which is the 20th century problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think ratios have been mentioned before in the past, where for every $10 that has been issued by the public funds for the people, something like only 10% or 15% of that actually reaches the people. The rest is due to leakages and corruption
Absolutely.
and theft and all these kind of things. So it seems to me, on all counts, to be feasible for application. Perhaps it could be the case that the government themselves don't want to apply this because their alternative incomes might be threatened. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I don't want governments to take my word or anybody's word for that matter. Why don't you take a small province, a small area, or a small city?
What I'm saying, Doc, is that maybe the government, they don't want an efficient distribution mechanism because the bad players are there. feel that this could be a threat to their rice bowl. The corrupt few. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think there are always interests in wanting to maintain the status quo because they profit from that interest. You see? But I think that is the biggest stumbling block for this idea is that bureaucracy and from the top to the bottom is not interested in making things efficient, as you and I will call. As ordinary citizens, we want to make it efficient, but they're not interested in making it efficient, despite what they preach outside, right? So I think there are interests. So I would let me quote the famous sociologist Max Weber. He said, history is an interplay of ideas and interests. So here is a idea, basic income idea. We are saying that this is going to benefit everybody, okay? But here is an interest which say, okay, but I'm going to lose what I have been enjoying, right? But my privileges are going to be lost. So this is the stumbling block. I'm glad you brought this point, but that is really something that as a population we have to confront in order to make our lives better.
I think India has made some tough decisions in the past. I remember the days of the Modi days of demonetization. I think one of the key reasons he did that was to remove the corrupt element or to remove the avenues for corruption in government, and thereby he reduced the numbers of, I think, 500 rupees and 1,000 rupee notes in circulation. And he did that overnight, right? I remember
Yeah.
those days. Well, whether Modi can do that, why can't smaller countries like Malaysia, where it's feasibly more easy and more convenient to apply to in a much smaller population?
Definitely, I think you really said it. I think those are the tough decisions government have to take. But I think that kind of thinking has to come from the party think tanks, right? I think that is the kind of pressure one has to put on the governments in order to how do you, I mean, the word I can use is that how do you clean up the mess?
Drain the swamp.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this has to be brought into the public domain and spoken about, right? I think this is very, very important. As long as we don't do that, we can't progress.
Well, I hope to see you next week or in a few days' time when you come to Malaysia. I'm going to try my best to get to your event and listen to you and Dr. Williams expound the benefits of universal basic income, because I do think in Malaysia we do need that. There are a lot of people suffering. There are a lot of people who are not getting by. And this can be solved because it's a fiscal solution. And what can be solved with more money in the pocket will make a lot of people, their lives a lot less difficult. Last one belongs to you, Doc. Closing thoughts. What are your executive summary, your TLDR?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think we'll see each other in Kuala Lumpur next week. Yeah, I think there is a saying in Africa called if you let water flow, it will go to the last point. You see? So I think one thing a basic income will do is that it will reach the last person, not just the last mile, but the last person. And then the poorest and the most underprivileged are the ones who will benefit most. If that is not going to be the mission of government, what else could it be? Thank you so much for this discussion. It was very, very bold and provocative, and thank you so much.
I couldn't have ended that discussion any better, Doc. Thank you so much for your time, and take care of yourself. I hope your plans reach fruition as they should. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.